All right. Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome. This is 30 Minutes With. This is Downtown Spokane's recurring webinar series in which we bring to you local industry experts and community leaders to talk about some of the more pressing topics of the day. My name is Kevin Campbell. I'm the Business Relations Coordinator for the Downtown Spokane Partnership and Business Improvement District. And today we're going to be hearing from Alex Gibilisco. Alex is the City Council Manager of Equity and Inclusion Initiatives, and he is going to be speaking with us today about those topics, equity and inclusivity. Alex was brought onto this role back in the summer of 2020, and before that he was previously serving as the Program Development Specialist for the City of Tacoma's Community Services Department. So in a moment, I will pass things over to Alex. We're excited to hear from him. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to just put them into the chat box, and then when he's finished with the prepared portion, we can get to those questions, as well as take some time at the end to open things up to a live Q&A in case any of you would like to unmute and ask Alex any questions yourself. One last thing I'll note is that we do record these sessions and make them available online, so you will be able to reference this session as well as all of our previous sessions in case you'd like to reference that content or share it. So with that, I will go ahead and pass things over to Alex. Alex, thanks again for taking the time and being with us today. We appreciate it and looking forward to hearing from you. So if you are ready, go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. So I will share a quick presentation here in a second. I am looking forward to having an open conversation. So I'll run through some slides, really focusing on, diversity, equity, and inclusion, some examples that we could probably use, but then also how, as an organization, city, institutions, or businesses, can adopt some of these practices so we are able to implement them in our daily lives. Again, I will share my screen, but my name's Alex Gibilisco. I work at the City of Spokane as Manager of Equity and Inclusion, as Kevin mentioned. And let me get started. So I'm always excited to have these conversations. And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and let me make sure that I am just sharing it. Okay, so I think diversity, equity, and inclusion can mean so many different things to a lot of different people. And I guess my question to everyone is, what is, diversity is, how do we include people from diverse backgrounds, genders, racial and ethnicities, disabilities, right? Ways that we think. Inclusion is, how do we bring them into the space? Are people feeling welcomed? Are they feel like they're being included? Are they part of the fabric that makes decisions? And then equity. Equity, I think, is a question that I wanted to pose to some of you guys. So if you guys want to post in the chat box kind of what you think equity is, what it means, and how do you apply it. Actually, just what it is. Let me see if I can see any chat boxes. If not, we could definitely move forward. So I'll just move forward then. I see equity as let me make sure I can get back to my slides here. I see equity as an ideal where every individual can show up and be their full selves in all the different environments. And I think that's a value that a lot of us have, or a lot of us want to aspire to. And I just want to be able to run through some slides here, but I also want to say that equity is, sorry, just like got to chat. It's easier to say what equity is not. It is not the way we've always done things, which yes, I would agree. And we have a value that we want to always do equity, but for some reason, we don't get there. We don't invest in that. So what I am proposing today is that we focus on outcomes. And then the next 3 steps is, how do we get ourselves thinking about equity? How do we organize around it? And then how do we implement it? So when we're looking at outcomes, they're the outcomes that we want and that meet the values that we say we have, especially when it comes around race, gender, people with disabilities, and a lot of our other protected classes. So if we're focusing on outcomes, we can see that we are not there. So this is coming from the American Survey, 2018, the 5-year American Community Survey. So this is showing our poverty rate. And as you can see, it is not equal. It is one of the reasons that when it comes to equity, we focus a lot on race and also gender, but race is the main one. And that's because anytime that we filter by race, we can see that disparities are glaring. So we can focus, in women and then in race, and then we can see that pay disparities, at least within those classes, get bigger when you add a race filter onto it. So the ideal of this work isn't to get everybody to be in the 48th percentile of poverty. The ideal of this work is to get the community to be at 9th percentile in poverty. And so all are even amongst the different races. This is another just more recent example of disparities. So how our outcomes, social outcomes are happening. This is an article from June 29th, 2020, in the impact of COVID-19 on our Marshallese community. Here, our Marshallese community and Native American Hawaiian Islanders communities are less than 1% of the population, yet they were about 30% of the cases that were going, right? And a lot of these are systemic issues. Not one individual can address them, and there's cultural and historical concerns that we could consider when making decisions. In 2016, this is the Gender and Racial Equity study at the city of Spokane. And I put a QR code up there in case you want access to it. Just put up your phone camera and you'll be able to see the whole report. And it really details out, women that work at the city of Spokane make 85 cents to the dollar that every man makes. And then you can see that disparity in the private sector, it's 78. In the city of Spokane, it's 78 cents to every dollar. And then for women of color in the private sector, it's 63 cents to every dollar that a man makes. So kind of just showing some of the outcomes that we have by oftentimes avoiding the conversations of race and gender in decisions that we make. So this is a study that came from the Snohomish County of small business, and it looked at the impact of small businesses equity. Well, the project was Small Businesses Equity and Resiliency Project, and it was just done during COVID. They used some COVID relief funds to do the study and see what the impact on their business community was. So one of the results that they had was by eliminating these disparities, it would create significant economic prosperity if parity were achieved between minority ownership and current non-minority ownership. Projections indicate minority-owned firms in Snohomish County would add 2,000 more firms and 13,000 more jobs. So, addressing and recognizing that there are some barriers to being inclusive in the business world, and diminishing or removing some of those barriers would increase the amount of jobs and businesses that we have in our area. At our first slide, one of the things that I want to talk about is normalizing the conversation. So does your organization have a mission and vision statement that includes equity, that has a goal that wants to drive there? Another thing that we're working on at the city is some of our assessments of the organization. What are our practices? Are we being inclusive? What do we know? What's our knowledge? And then also learn about equity and inequity and intersectionalities and a lot of the language that we're probably not used to having. And it all leads to being able to have uncomfortable conversations about disparities, and being uncomfortable, having these initial conversations are very uncomfortable at first, but having these conversations can actually help us work towards solutions and ideas where we are able to narrow a lot of these disparities, if not just outright get rid of them. But saying that, setting expectations, there has been decades, if not hundreds of years, that people have been working on this. And there's definitely people that are working against equity reform or reforms that drive towards equity as well. So it's not a short-term goal. It should definitely be a long-term goal. So then organize, how do you, so now that you've had these conversations, you're feeling comfortable, organize, create work groups, look at your workforce disparities. So look internally, how do you support the men and women that work in your businesses, supporting minority and women-owned businesses, and how do you develop a plan to kind of, with action items to kind of drive towards meeting that value of equity. So for the workforce, earlier I shared the City of Spokane's, gender and race equity workforce, and these are just some things that they highlighted. So do an assessment. Don't shy away from the race and gender questions, because that's where you'll see the disparities, and create an action plan. And that's basically what that report was. Unbiased hiring, wording on your job post matters. So there has been multiple studies where there are more male affirming ways that you describe activities that people tend to shy away from, or the requirements on a job. Some requirements on jobs tend to have people to self-select out when some of the job requirements aren't needed for that. So one example is a college degree, right? If you have job experience, maybe that's something you could substitute that with. And then also, how do you retain a diverse workforce? So, continue doing surveys on your organizations, see what the environment in the organization is, and how can you address that? Also, train your management on gender and racial equity bias. So just moving on to different ways, and I was thinking this more for like the group, is how do we activate our downtown area? How do we make it more inclusive, that people want to come here from diverse backgrounds? One of the things that I quickly learned moving to Spokane is that we have a large Russian population. How do we create events that drive people downtown? So one of the things that we at the city are doing, just knowing that we want to include more individuals at the city and at city council, is we created a cultural calendar. So this is like the lowest hanging fruit that I think that we can have, is identifying when different cultures are celebrating certain days or days that we recognize already, and having activations around that. For us, it's setting up conversations. So we had our first one, which was a talk back on MLK Day. I think for Black History Month, how can we invite businesses to our downtown, that are Black-owned businesses to our downtown, to be able to sell and market some of their items? We have different ways that we could definitely activate it. So some of the night markets, I think some of our council members, I know Councilmember Wilkerson was definitely very interested in seeing how can we bring either restaurant owners or artists downtown to create, to be part of these events, so we can just celebrate that. And at the same time, it's educational for other members in the community, right? How do we do, how do we invite diverse businesses to come and set up shop downtown? And I think part of that is what's keeping them away. Is there an accessibility concerns, or just not knowing how to navigate the systems, being able to ask those questions? But I think a lot of these things is we have to be very intentional on doing it. And if we're not trying to address those concerns, we're not going to be able to get there. Let me see. Yeah. And so let me get back to your questions on some of these, because I am really almost done here. And so those are some ideas. And then also, how do businesses that are already downtown engage with our artists that are in the community and invite them to come and maybe hang their art and sell their art, right? I know that my first experience is coming downtown or to Spokane. So my wife was the one that got the job offer first. So we were trying to we came to Spokane. We wanted to see if this was a city that we wanted to be a part of. But as we're driving downtown and as we're walking downtown, I was like, I didn't see myself here, right? Like there's other communities where you see the art pieces, of different cultures just throughout, celebrating, the multiculturalism that a lot of cities and urban areas have. And I didn't see that. And what I had seen in other places, it's like, the local artists are selling their arts in the restaurants you go walking into. And maybe I haven't been to the right restaurants yet, because I luckily moved here during COVID. But I am definitely looking for that. And so how do we activate all these different spaces while at the same time not only supporting local businesses, but giving them the space where they're also growing economically? So I think that's going to allude to one of the questions there, but let me stop sharing my presentation and I can read that question. So there are sometimes concerns about cultural appropriation when organizing multicultural events at my organization. Any recommendations to address this? Yes. I think who's at the table when it comes to organizing meetings definitely matters. If we're organizing a multicultural event, one of the things is let's make sure that the organizers are also part of these cultures. Who's benefiting economically is also the people that we're trying to highlight there. So let's say if it's food or art, how can we bring those organizations to the table to help organize it? Maybe all they want to do is fundraise for, this was a recent request, right? Or conversation that I've had with a Hispanic Business Young Professional Association was, hey, we're due to COVID, our usual fundraising event is probably not going to be as big as it has been in the past. How can we activate something where we can also fundraise for scholarships for young kids, right? So maybe working and collaborating with the different groups to ensure that a lot of their concerns are being met. And I know that at times there's different barriers that come up, and I think making sure that we're able to either remove some of their barriers or how to address them. And I think that was from, did I miss the chat? So does that answer your question, Erin?
Thanks, it does. That was really helpful. Appreciate it,
Okay.
Alex.
Which organizational assessment is the city using? Actually, we are doing a few different things at the city. When it comes to our own organization, we're about to embark in some training, at least within the city council office. We're about to embark on some equity training, and we're partnering with Better Health Together to do that. And they have an organizational assessment that I think it's usually prompt questions about, and I haven't seen their assessment, but assessments usually have prompt questions about where you're at on diversity and inclusion. What's your vision statement, mission statement? What's your knowledge about equity? And all those different terminologies. Have you done different studies, and where are you at especially in your policy making process would be our case and our budget making process. So that's something that we're embarking in. Generally, some other things that we have coming up are we received the research award from New American Economy, which is a partnership with Welcoming America. And they are organizations that work on integration of immigrants and refugees into communities. So we are part of, we're looking at contributions immigrants and refugees make to the city of Spokane and the county. And from there, we're hoping to build partnerships to create an action plan on how do we become more inclusive to these new neighbors and community members. Would you speak a little about intersectionality? Yeah, so, thank you. Yes, I want to talk a little, I feel like there's a whole big presentation that we could probably do on all the language that we need to be set up to have real deep dives into diversity and equity. But definitely intersectionality, it's, the different, how people are being impacted due to just what they look like or where they come from. And, intersectionality really talks about the appearances, that you have. So, and conscious, and we will have to go into like unconscious and conscious biases. So, in historical and cultural contexts where somebody might see a person of color and think one thing, a man of color and have one perception, but a community could also look at a woman of color and have different outcomes where they treat them differently. And then you have a gay person of color and society treats them a totally different way. And adding all these different layers, you can see a lot of the different issues, stereotypes that we have built up through our years, and how we and how that impacts individuals, throughout their lives. So thank you, Kara, for that question. What are your thoughts? Let me see. So in the presentation, are these, sorry, I missed some of those comments earlier on. What are your thoughts about setting and tracking metrics that really matter? How do we know that we've made progress that we can celebrate together? What does success look like? I think when it comes to success, is being able to filter out, to me, it's being able to look by the different intersectionalities, race, gender, disabilities, and look at the different social outcomes and see that doesn't make a difference. But currently it does, and I don't see it going away. But there's a lot of different metrics that we can use. So we have the economic metrics, we have health equity outcomes. So how long people live, access to healthcare. When it comes to I guess going back to some of the economic questions, is, you know, access to money, wealth to start businesses and continue going on businesses, or, you know, not living paycheck through paycheck. So, or home ownerships, things that we could probably all look at, but how do we get there? I think, yeah, recommendations on doing this. So this is a big project that's not just on one individual. We should all kind of own a piece of it, learn where we have impacts and curve, and, you know, yeah, continue learning and growing in this. That would be my tip on how we do this, but we have to all work at it as a community. And I know as a person of color, there was at times that I needed to learn how to have conversations about race and equity in a healthy manner, just because I knew it was impacting me, but I didn't know how to express those impacts. And yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Looks like Laura had to leave, but she wanted to welcome you to Spokane. We're just about at time now, so if anyone would like to ask maybe one last question, we can take that. Or Alex, if you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with, we could use that time as well.
Yeah, I just had I think it's exciting that the city and the community is really wants to engage and grapple a lot of the equity work. I think there's a lot of energy behind that, but I do want us to focus on goals. And, you know, somebody that's working on economics might not care about health equity outcomes, but, you know, access to employment does matter when it comes to your health equity outcomes, right? So, so if we are all just learning and growing in this and address and learning different strategies on how we can address this, we can all kind of build towards our common goal and what I believe is a common value of being able to treat everybody the same, or giving everybody the opportunity to succeed despite of what they look like and who they are.
That's great. Alex, I'd like to just ask maybe one last question,
Okay.
kind of going along some of the topics we have already talked about, but you know, as far as starting these uncomfortable conversations, how would you recommend to people, or what advice maybe do you have for getting people outside of their bubble to start these conversations? Because we know, you know, sometimes that's kind of what the problem is we don't have access maybe that we know of to reach the people that we need to talk to. So what can kind of people do to get outside of their bubble to start these conversations and talk to the people that can really help?
Yeah, you know, I was going to also part of this, you know, being able to join these conversations is probably a good start. I know in Tacoma, they have a downtown on the go, which I'm assuming is similar to downtown Spokane, Prague. And, you know, they sometimes host they had one session that was called Where the Sidewalks End. And it was really a conversation about planning and equity disparities. And, you know, being able to invite some of those conversations to learn more about, you know, looking for those opportunities where you can learn more about it. When it comes in group settings, you know, it all starts personally, right? Like what's the environment that you're creating in your life that does not allow you to interact with other people? People of color are not, you know, there's that assumption that people of color are always poor, right? And that's just not true, right? Like we're in every economic bracket, and what's the space that you're creating to be able to have those conversations with different neighbors? And, you know, there's that internal look, then there's also your work group, you know, your professional groups of how, you know, how those are built, where are we recruiting from? And then there's, you know, the bigger community group. So, you know, just being able to, I guess if business owners are here, the tip I would give is like, let's look at a cultural calendar and invite people that would usually not be here to help us lead this event. Or let's look at, let's look for that artist that we can pay or buy some stuff from, or they can hang stuff on the wall here. That's not the typical person that we would have here at the table. So looking for those different opportunities where we could make a place and environment feel more inclusive.
Excellent. Well, with that, we are just about at time. We've got some comments coming in welcoming you to Spokane and thanking you for your time, Alex. We appreciate it. So we'll wrap things up here for today, but of course, we'll all be in touch with each other going down the road. So thank you again, Alex. And everyone, if you'd like to keep an eye on our events calendar on downtownspokane.org, you can see what other sessions we will have coming up in the future. But we'll make this available online. And, Alex, appreciate you being here with us today. And we'll look forward to all the good work Spokane has to do. So thanks a lot and have a good day, everyone.
Bye.